Thank you so much for joining us today. I want you to welcome Mindy Obenhaus, who is with us on Other Things. Mindy is an award-winning author who is passionate about touching readers with biblical truths in an entertaining and sometimes adventurous manner. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. She traces her love of romance back to the first time she saw Cinderella. Little did she know that one day she would be penning her own love stories with faith, family, and happily ever afters. A mother of 5 and grandmother of 8, almost a grandmother of 9. Is that correct?
Great-grandmother.
Great-grandmother. Okay. A great-grandmother. She's too young to be a great-grandmother, but we'll let her have that. But Mindy resides on a ranch in Texas with her husband, 2 sassy pups, countless cattle, deer, and the occasional coyote, mountain lion, and snake. And let me say right up front, you can learn more about Mindy and her books at her website. And she's got a really nice website, got a lot of information on there at www.mindyobenhaus.com. But Mindy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Kenny. It's nice to be here.
Well, you are the inaugural guest. You're the first guest.
Oh, no pressure.
I noticed behind you that you have several of your book cover. Do you call those covers or jackets? What do you call those?
But what's behind me is what we call a cover flat.
A cover flat, okay. And they cut that or fold that around the actual book, right?
Exactly. And okay. So yeah, there's more above that, and there's more scattered throughout my office.
Well, we're going to talk about your writings here. It's amazing. I'm so encouraged. But you've published 13 books to date. Now, that's not counting the other books to where you're co-author and compilations that are also out there on the market. But you've published 13 books to date. And let me say, they're all a part of the Harlequin love-inspired publication series. Mm-hmm. And also, Mindy is found everywhere on Amazon, on Walmart.com, on Target.com. They already show some of her books that are to be released. You can pre-order those. And also on Amazon, she's both in print and in Kindle, which is huge. But it breaks down. Then this is just to give you as the viewers a little understanding background. She has the Bliss Series Texas, which is right now a set of 4 volumes. The Rocky Mountain Heroes series, which is 5 volumes. And then she has several standalone books. Those are 4 volumes. She's received the American Christian Fiction Writers Carroll Award as a finalist recognition several times on several of the books. Also, the 2020 Holt Medallion Award winner for short inspiration. And we're going to talk about that book here in just a minute. Also, the Faith, Hope, and Love Reader's Choice Award. She was the winner in 2020 for a short contemporary book. But let me ask you for just a minute, and we don't have time to go through all the books, but I did actually read the one, I don't have the title in front of me, about the man who finds out he's a father. And so I get a little bit of a taste of your writing style and the sincerity. And as a fellow Texan, I can say that I definitely sense the whole Texas atmosphere in your writing. But let me ask you about the book, and I actually can't see it in the lights here. The one where you won the short inspirational award, the Holt Medallion Award for Her Colorado Cowboy. What do you think it is about that particular book that stood out that others who give accolades said, hey, this is a writing worth looking into?
I honestly don't know. And there can be a story that I really, really think is going to do great, and I don't want to say it falls flat, but it doesn't get quite the reception. And then others that I think are maybe lesser, do real well. That one Harlequin has actually repackaged that in a 2-for-1 or a 2-in-1 anthology and stuff. And they use, I think one thing about that was the cover. That's in terms of sales. Now that obviously in contests, they don't necessarily look at the covers. They're reading the book. But I try to put my heart into them and put myself into the characters' shoes, into the characters' heads, and just try to let the reader to experience things with them. And I want the characters to be real. I don't want them to be cardboard cutouts. And if it's somebody that they can relate to, then it just, I don't know. You just, and contests, I will say, are very subjective too.
Well, sure. But I think it's something to actually be recognized for anything. It's a very competitive world, and for someone to stand back and to say, "Hey, this book is worth reading," and so the people watching, they can actually find that out on, especially on some of the different websites to where they show the awards that your books have received. Also, I had another question. There's another book that actually was the winner for Faith, Hope, and Love Reader's Choice Award in 2020 for short contemporary, Reunited in the Rockies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a part of the Rocky Mountain Heroes series. Is that correct?
Yes. So was her Colorado Cowboy. Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. So both of those were part of the Rocky series.
Yes.
So anything special about that stands out in your mind?
And okay, here's what's something kind of funny. So both of those books were entered into the same contests, and one won one contest and the other one won another contest. So I don't, like I said, it really depends on how the people react to it. And you just don't know who how it's going to touch the judges that are reading those particular things. Like I say, I do try to put a lot of emotion into my books.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we connect with people. And so if there's something there that resonates with somebody, then, obviously they're going to walk away either feeling really good, or when you write romance, you have a happily ever after. And so you would hope they walk away smiling. That's my thing, is to close a book and just to have that contented sigh when I'm finished.
Mm-hmm. Well, I sensed that in the book that I had the opportunity to read. It was encouraging. It was realistic. It dealt with some difficult subjects in a I guess you would say, a Christ honoring way, and yet you didn't skate the issues. And so there's very much a reality to it. It was interesting reading the reviews on Amazon. A lot of astounding reviews and a lot of reviews. And so what you share is what I read. The people say that you're hitting the mark, and that they've inspired and can't wait for the next book to come out. So I think you're to be congratulated for that. And it's inspirational, Mindy, because especially in the backdrop against what we see happening in our culture, that you are an example that something can be done with excellence, something can be done with good taste, and approach difficult subjects, but not have to go bad, in a negative way. And the hope that things can resolve and have a happy ever after.
Christians don't live perfect lives. Some people think we do, or that we're supposed to be, but we make mistakes too. And, the good news is that we have a God who forgives us. And this is a little off point here, but we've been watching The Chosen season 2, and we've kind of rewatching it. There's one scene in there where Mary Magdalene has wandered away from Jesus. And I mean, physically and emotionally. And she regrets it. She comes back. She's afraid to look at him because she knows that she turned her back on him. And yet Jesus just looks at her and says, "You're forgiven." And that just created such a picture in my mind of how God is with us. We're afraid to come back to, we know we messed up. We're afraid to come back to him sometimes. And he's just waiting for us. And when we do, and we look him in the face, and he just says, "You're forgiven."
That's excellent. And I think that comes through in your writing, that sense of redemption.
Absolutely. Obviously we'd be lost without it. And it's not a one and done.
And I'm thankful for that. Let me ask you, in correspondence with you, you mentioned that you were in a deadline, and this is just kind of looking forward of getting a book in. And like I said, Target already shows that you have a couple of books to pre-order, but can you give us just a little bit of background on what God is doing in your life and where you're taking your stories the titles and not the whole synopsis, but just kind of a heads up on where you're headed?
Oh, goodness. Well, it's I've got a new series that will be coming out in May. So that's what, or in September, I'm sorry, will be the first book coming out. And so I'm actually working on book 3. Just the deadline was book 2. I just got that turned in that series. And that's the one that'll be out in December. And it's honestly, the first book is a little heavier. The second one, after writing some more challenging things, the second one, I was like, this one is kind of a little more lighthearted. And am I missing something, God? Is this is this what you want me to do? But there always has to be conflict in there, so it will still be in there. And so yeah, it's interesting to build a community and see the flaws that people have, and of course we like to highlight those flaws and then find a way to redeem them.
Now, you said an interesting word, and I think you mean this in reference to your writing, that to build a community. Were you talking about your writing?
I was talking about the stories, building the fictitious community within the story and the characters. And as I live in a very small rural community here in Texas, and so there's just you find you've got all kinds. You've got quirky characters. You've got I don't know. There's people, even some people that you probably know from when we went to church together that have showed up in a couple of books. Not personally, but I have used them as their characteristics. And this was in a good way, not a negative way.
There you go. But, I think I'm inspired by that because the word community to me right now is very important, especially the past 2.5 years of what we've been through. And Mindy, that's also why we've launched other things with Mindy Obenhaus, because even though this is it's really a kind of a single dimensional aspect, they pull up their laptop or their phone and they watch this interview, but in a very real way, the power of the conversation does develop community, and people feel inspired, people feel connected. And to me, that's very important. And then also the fact that you made yourself very available through email, through your website, for people to reach out. To me, that says even more about who you are. Also, that aspect of community that pours over into your whole life as an author, as a person. Let me ask you real quickly. I know we need to kind of keep things moving along, but let me get back over here to my cheat sheet here. I have to come through. But a side note, you mentioned the covers and that how some of the people like certain covers. You've got really cool covers, and the question is, where does that come from? How do you get those?
Well, fortunately, Harlequin has a really marvelous art department, but we do have to give them input. I usually have to provide them with 3 scenes that are in the book, and I have to describe them and what I envision. And then sometimes they listen to me and sometimes they don't. So I never know what I'm going to get, but I've been fairly pleased. And actually since I start probably on about book, let's see, if you'll notice how these are here, these start being different. They went to a different, they had done a very in-depth study of what readers might like and stuff. So they changed things up and they're doing things different now. And so we authors just kind of try to go with the flow and give them what they're looking for in terms of information. And as a matter of fact, I just got the cover for my September book today, and I don't have it where I can show it to you, but I was very, very pleased with what they did with it.
Awesome. Now, you saying that, let me get back here on this other sheet, because Target, tell me if these are the books that are coming out. What Target.com shows a pre-order ready for Easter on the Ranch, March 20th of 2023. November 29th, 2022, they're showing Her Holiday Lawman. Is that information correct?
Those are both what they call an anthology. There's 2 books in one. And so they've taken, each one of those will have one of a book that has already been published. And then they paired it with another author and another book. So the one is called Easter at the Ranch. So it's 2 ranch stories that have Easter in there. And then, of course, the Christmas ones. And both of is actually a friend of mine who's the second book in there. And they're both stories are about lawmen. So
that's cool. And I did notice that you have some books to where it's you, or is it a co-author where there's a couple of books? Are those the pairings?
That would be the pairings, yes.
The pairings. Okay. I didn't know if you were beginning to do that, kind of like,
no,
like songwriters, they'll get in the room and they'll springboard off of each other. But, well, let me ask you, it's so cool. And folks watching this show, there is a lot going on with Mindy. And like I said, she's all over the web. You just type her name and wherever you are, Walmart, Target, Amazon, she's there. But, back when I first met you, and I remember the night we were at the Sunday School Fellowship, and you were excited that you had your first, what do you call that? Not the jacket, but the flat.
The cover flat.
You had the cover flat, and you were so excited, and you were sharing with people that I'm so excited. This is the first book that's going to be published, and I remember that, and that probably was around the from what I can remember, if I get this correct, it's the Doctor's Family Reunion. Is that correct? Was your first publication?
Yes. So that was in 2013.
Right. Amazon says September of 2013. And, but real quick. So it came out in September. When did you actually finish that book? Was that all the way back in 12 probably, and then had to submit it? How long of a process from the time you submitted then it came out on the September of 13?
What that one, because it was my first, is much different than the way I do things now. Because when I submit a book, I submit a proposal, which is a synopsis of the whole book and the first 3 chapters. But back then, when you're first starting out, you have to submit an entire manuscript. And so I had gone to a conference, and I had met with an editor from Love Inspired, and I told her about the story, and she requested it. Now, this was in September of 11 when I met with her. She wanted to see the manuscript. And so I got it ready and I sent it off to her. And she had told me, she said, sometimes I don't get back right. If you don't hear anything, contact me. So probably about 6 months later, I contacted her and just touched base with her. And she said, well, I like the premise, but, I'd like to see some things changed in it. This just isn't working. And so she made suggestions, and that's not a rejection, that's a revision. And so I made those changes, and then I resubmitted it to her. And then she called me. So that was in 12. So in January of 13, she called me and said, I've read your story. It's not quite there yet, but I'd like to offer you a contract. And,
cool.
So I'm doing the happy dance all across my kitchen at that point. And so I had to rewrite, probably about at least half of the book based on her changes. And I had like a month to do that in, a few weeks. But I did it by the grace of God. And then that was January 13, and then the book came out of September 13.
Well, that's awesome. That gives everyone a context of the struggle that you actually went through just to get your first book published, and then also the intensity that exists in that process, I'm sure, from then on, right?
Absolutely. And even leading up to that, I started writing in 2004. Yeah, 2004 was when I started writing. And so it was a long time.
Well,
but I had a whole lot to learn too. I didn't know about the writing world.
Yeah. I mean, as a matter of fact, you share on your website in your bio that this was not something you set out to do in life. And that I believe you said, I think it was at the age of 40 to where was it around that time that you began to feel inspired or moved to do that?
Yep. Yep. I would say, yep, it took me till I was 40 to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up.
But real quickly, just give us a flyover view. And I know there's a lot that transpired from that moment. I believe when your mother came was she living with you or staying with you?
Yeah, she moved from Michigan to Texas in 2003. And
Okay.
my mom had always been an avid romance reader. And I was not a reader. I did not like to read, mostly because I equated it with school. And I just didn't get that bug. And so anyway, then she moved in with us and she brought all these books, boxes and boxes. And I said, Mom, we can't keep all these. So as I'm sorting through them, I got intrigued just like anybody else does. Well, this cover looks good. Turn it over, read the back, and well, that sounds kind of good. And well, anyway, that kind of where it started. So I started reading and, realized I blame it on being an only child, but I'd always been making up stories in my head. And so,
Isn't that something? So you were an only child,
mhm.
and that's a different world. It's a world I don't know. So did you find yourself as a child, though, with a lot of creativity going on inside?
Probably not like I should have had, but nothing. Okay. Yes, I had a lot of creativity. I had, like I say, I had my imaginary friends, because if my friends, I mean, especially on Christmas, friends, they had to be with their families. And here I was stuck and it was just me. I didn't have anybody to play my new toys with. So, so yeah, there was, I'm pretty sure I had an imaginary big brother. I always wanted a big brother and a little brother. So there was that.
Well, now I read one of your blogs to where now you have a 6'2" son. So he's not your brother, but
he is, yes, he towers. I feel very tiny when he's around. And
that's cool. He's as tall as I would like to be. Let me ask you, in the flyover, you mentioned that there were some challenges that you faced and obstacles or I don't know how you would want to look at that, but just maybe some things that can just share the struggles that you went through, that you overcame in order to fulfill your dream of being an author and being successful at this. Are there some kind of standout moments along the way that we can glean things from?
Well, I can totally say from a spiritual standpoint, when I started writing, I really didn't know anything about Christian fiction at all. I didn't know it existed. If it did, all I could think of was the little prairie romances and stuff, and that was not me. And I had completed a manuscript. It was terrible, but I had completed one and had begun learning the craft. I had gone to some writers' meetings and joined some writers' groups. And God really began to work on me. And I know the song Jesus Take the Wheel was part of it. And there's just little things that he put in my path, and just, how sometimes you just know he's working on you and you try to ignore him, and he doesn't mind if we ignore him. He just comes in stronger. But anyway, I knew he was calling me to write for him. And I did not feel worthy of that calling. And so I argued with him. That didn't get me anywhere, by the way. And so ultimately, I just kind of said, okay, God, fine, but you're going to have to help me do this. And I'm pretty sure he got a chuckle out of that. So, but he did at the same time. It was like, oh, there's some things I'd like you to kind of knock out of your life. And so I had to do that as well. I'm sorry, I forgot the rest of your question.
No,
you said markers, or the other significant thing was when it was in 2011, and I had it was Labor Day 2011, and we had come down to our ranch, and we were at our camp house, and a wildfire broke out that weekend. And it was the same weekend as the big Bastrop fires when Texas was on fire everywhere. And we were evacuated and all this stuff. Well, the following, nothing happened. We were spared stuff, and we had come back down the following weekend, and the fire had compelled my husband to cut this branch because it was touching our camp house. Well, so my son and I are holding the ladder, and that branch did not come down right, and that knocked the ladder out from under him. He went down and broke his back. And oh, by the way, there's a mass on your kidney, they said. Okay, well, so they thought he was air flighted to Houston, and we thought he was going to have surgery. Ended up, he did not have to have surgery. It was a compression fracture, but he wanted to know about that mass on his kidney. So they did a sonogram or they did a scan, and they weren't too concerned about it. They said, but you follow up with your regular doctor when you get home. So we did. So that was September. And well, okay, so start right there. He comes home. He can't walk. He can't get out of bed. I was supposed to leave on less than 2 weeks later to go to my annual American Christian Fiction Writers Conference. And I said, I'm not going to go because you can't walk. He was adamant that I was going to go. To the point that he made me leave the house and go buy a dress for the gala that they have. And I did that and just said, well, okay, I'll do it, and I'll keep the receipt and I'll just take it back. But he said, no, he was adamant. And so I'm scheduled to leave on a Tuesday or Wednesday. And as of Sunday or Monday, he still couldn't get out of bed by himself. And neither of our boys were driving. We're old enough to drive yet. And so you know, your husband is behind you when he picks up the phone and he calls your Sunday school teacher and says, I need help. And he made sure I went. Well, that was the conference when I first pitched that first book to that editor that ultimately ended up selling.
Well, that's awesome. Just God working and having that kind of support. And I know a very stressful time for you, and yet in the midst of it, God was actually working out his plan.
Absolutely. And I will say, just a little addendum there. And then it turned out he did have a problem with his kidney. He ended up having kidney cancer. And so on November 14th, he had his kidney removed. The cancer was contained. And then he developed complications while he was in the hospital. He had developed a blood clot on his lung, or they just trying to find out what was wrong with him. They discovered he had a blood clot on his lung. He ended up spending 10 days in the hospital. But if it hadn't been for the fire, he wouldn't have been compelled to cut that branch. If he hadn't cut that branch, he wouldn't have broken his back. And if he wouldn't have broken his back, they would not have found that cancer. And if he hadn't had complications, he'd have gone home with a blood clot on his lung. It may not look like it, but God is always working on our behalf.
I believe that, Mindy. I've seen that so many times in visiting with people in my ministry past, and they said, well, Daddy, I remember one woman, my father fell off the roof, almost killed him. And she said, and to top it off, they found out he has cancer. And I told her, I said, well, no, but because it saved his life. And I said,
Absolutely.
No, he fell off the roof so that he would know he had cancer. He didn't know. And he survived and recovered from the fall, but also they were able to do surgery and, save his life. So I absolutely believe that's how God works many times. And I think that comes out in the way you write, also the fact that God is involved. And I tell you, Mindy, something that I hear in your speech that I want to point out to our viewers is you hearing God, you feeling strong impressions from the Lord, not necessarily always audible words, but also the way that you see that God is at work, even in the difficult things that you personally in your own life experience. And to me, I think that's a fantastic way of viewing life.
Well, it doesn't come easy, but it's through those hardships, and you just go, you know what? He hasn't failed me yet, And, I might look up and say, okay, I'm not liking this right now, what I'm going through, but I know you've got a reason for it. And so, yeah, I do, that does transcend to my writing, because we all have those things. And, it's just a part of life, and it's how we react to those things and how those things impact us that separates us as Christians.
Well, let me ask you, this is something that's just coming to mind. It's a laborious task to write a book. I mean, it was hard for me just to write a paper for college. But in the middle of writing, do you find yourself refreshed? Are you stressed? Or, in the process, is it a place that you go to for, I guess, just for refreshing? Or how do you feel when you're in that mode?
All of the above. There are days when I just feel like I'm banging my head against a wall. God, the words are not coming. And sometimes, sometimes I literally have to step away because there's nothing. And then there's other days when I know what's going to happen, and my fingers can't fly fast enough. But I have learned to try to remove myself from the process. Sometimes I forget, and I'll be struggling with my writing, and I'll stop and I'll say, I did it again. Because what I did was I forgot to pray. And I try to pray every time I sit down to write, just to ask God to remove me from the equation, to just make me his vessel. Because I find that when I'm not trying to push my own agenda and I'm doing what he wants me to do, is when things tend to go a whole lot better.
That's cool. I mean, to me, I think you're describing the perfect creative process, to where art is, it comes out of you, but it's something beyond you. And the fact that you really seek to empty yourself to where your mind's clear. And it's almost like you're viewing the story with us. Do you ever feel that way, to where you see the story unfolding?
I do. And there's times when, I think I know what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden God will just, make a sharp left turn, and there we go. And I'll get done. I'm like, wow, I wasn't expecting that, but that was really cool.
That's awesome. To me, that's the ultimate art, is to where you're surprised by things in the middle of it. Let me ask you, real quickly here. I want to touch briefly on the Seekerville, The Journey Continues blog. It looks like you do a pretty good job of actually posting that kind of on a regular basis. And it's a really cool website. How did you find out about that? And then also, I want to ask you about, real quickly, a couple of questions on your post, The Many Hats of an Author. But how did you find that avenue of expression?
Well, Seekerville was, okay, first of all, when writers go to conferences, we kind of, we meet like-minded people who don't think we're weird when we hear voices. So it's always nice to hang around those people. But at any rate, Seekerville started, oh gosh, a long, long time ago. And it was because it was a group of ladies aspiring authors at the time, who kept finaling in contests together and stuff. And so they got together and they started this blog. Well, in 2018, late 2017, I guess, a lot of them, some of them wanted to kind of retire. They wanted to step away from the blog. And so that's why it's called The Journey Continues. And that was when I was invited to join them, me and several other ladies. So there's some that are original seekers, and then some of us joined them. And it's, everybody's published now, but we approach it. Well, we even have some publicists on there too, but we talk about the craft of writing, but then we also talk about day-to-day life. And obviously our faith is a big part of that. So sometimes, like my last post was, much more, it was called Growing Pains. It was about God stretching us. It's not just those growing pains we used to get as kids, but sometimes God decides he's going to stretch us. And I typically, when I write, I do it once a month. And when I write for that, I just kind of go, okay, where am I at right now? What is going on in my writing life or in my life in general? And so, yeah, you can tell he was stretching me recently.
I think that's neat, and especially it's like an addendum to your writing, so people can have a better understanding just what you just said about where are you in your life and what God is saying to you. Let me ask you on the many hats of an author that you posted back in February. I thought this was really good, and it's like 6 aspects of the hats. And you also kind of mentioned the fact that these are 6 hats, but there's probably, there's more. But you talk about the writer hat, the editor hat, the marketing hat, the mail clerk hat, the mentor hat, and the teacher hat. And I like what you say, that the writer's hat is the working hat. And you give a little bit of definition there. On the editing, you've already kind of alluded to the fact that you do have a editor from, I know the series, but is Harlequin, are they actually the people that edit, or your editor, are they a part of harlequin.com or Harlequin?
I have, yeah, my editor is, yeah, I have an editor. I've actually had 4 editors. I'm on my 4th editor. I don't know what the deal is there. If they don't like me or, no, honestly, it's all been very normal, but no, I work closely with my editor because I have to, when I have an idea for a new story, I typically will, I send a proposal for a series, but then each story within the series, I have to send her a proposal in the first 3 chapters on, and she has to approve those before I can, finish up the book and so on and so forth, although I generally keep writing. But so yeah, and the editor relationship needs to be, it's a fairly close relationship, but I have to be my own editor before I send it off to her. And my husband actually helps me too. Well, he's great at typos and some other things. He'll say, I know what you're trying to say here, but this isn't right. He didn't.
That's cool. John Grisham, his story of publishing, he published 3,000, self-published, A Time to Kill, 3,000 copies, and did library tours. And he couldn't get a book deal. And he found out his manager called him at Sunday school. He's a Sunday school teacher at the time, and said, John, I found out that your book is being shopped in Hollywood for a book deal. What do you want me to do about it? He said, sell it to the highest bidder. This is a true story. 660,000. And he said he couldn't get anybody to publish him. But what's interesting is his wife, if I remember correctly, is a grammar teacher, English teacher. And so she was his editor on that book. But so it's helpful. I think even Stephen King, his wife, used to do back when he was first starting. And I don't read Stephen King books, but I did read his book on writing, because I thought, well, this guy's published a lot. What does he know about it? Very good book. But that's cool. So on the marketing hat, and it's encouraging. And I tell you, you're to be commended for the work that's happening from you and your team to get the word out about yourself, about your books, because you are found everywhere, I think, which is key in this world. You mentioned people that are with Just Read Publicly Tours, that they've been a tremendous help, Carrie, Beth, and the rest of the crew for helping getting the books out. But did you find out about them again through these seminars that you've gone to, these support groups, and how did you come across them as a people that you can connect with to help get your books out?
Actually, them I found out when I joined Seekerville, because they had brought a couple of Carrie and Beth, and there was another gal, Annie, had brought her on board, and they were book bloggers. I was not familiar with book bloggers. And so that was kind of eye-opening for me, and I've learned a lot from them. But they, at the time, they were just book bloggers. Now they have this publicity company, and so they do blog tours, they do Instagram or Bookstagram tours, and various things. And so, I was like, well, sign me up for that, because I know nothing. I'm not a marketing person, and so I do struggle with it.
Just a side note, as I was just preparing for all this and looking at your writing and reading one of your books, that side question, have you ever thought about trying to see connecting with like Hallmark? It seems to me that what you write about and the way you go about things would be a very good fit for that channel. I know with a lot of women that I know, we don't have cable here, but not just women, but families that care about good programming, that they have just massive series and a wonderful production facility. Have you ever thought about that or been approached?
I have not been approached. Yes, we are all very well aware of Harlequin or of Hallmark. And a lot of times that's how I will describe my books. I'll say, think about a Hallmark movie with a faith element to it. And I know some authors, I don't know of a love-inspired author, but I know of one who she wrote for another line with Harlequin, because Harlequin has a ton of lines, some of which I will never read. But but she actually has, they made one of her books into a Hallmark movie. And, but that's something that's purely up to Hallmark. And prior to COVID, Harlequin had actually, I don't want to say they had partnered with a movie production company, and they were making a lot of Hallmark books. And actually there was one, not Hallmark, Harlequin books. And there was a friend of mine who writes for Love Inspired, and one of hers was made into a movie. And of course they took out the faith element, but you know, as long as they're true to the essence of the story, that's okay. But no, I watch a lot of Hallmark.
Yeah, I just see that. And
they actually, they have a publishing wing too.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And I think about guys like Dallas Jenkins, who is innovative in the way he's getting his movies and his work to the screen. And I hope guys like him increase, because definitely, I mean, I could see a Dallas Jenkins having a whole subset of movies that are source fund raised material, but to take your series and bring them to life. And actually the scripting wouldn't be that difficult, because you've got a robust dialogue going on between the characters. So anyway, I hope, and like you said, I realize a lot of times you don't have control over that, but at the same time, to me, it seems like a natural fit, especially with the media starving world that we live in. They want content, and you've already got the content here. Just moving on real quickly here. We got about 7 more minutes if I'm looking at, maybe 12. Yeah. But I'm just inspired because of all the things that you do to get the job done. And you make a comment right at the very end. You say being an author entails much, much more than just writing. And can you just give a little vignette? Because I can guarantee you, Mindy, there are a lot of people that feel like that they have a book inside them, but yet, and I'm one of them. It's like, I've got all these titles of books, and I've got the whole kind of subset, and I'm 62 years old, and my wife is saying, when are you going to write your book? And so, I'm personally inspired by talking to you today. And, but just give a brief, overview, just anything you want to share about that, because of your transparency, that if you want to be an author, there's a lot more, and this article covers that. But anything that you want to just stand out as a word of encouragement, perhaps to someone who's watching, who says, I've got a book inside me, what would you say to them?
I would say, now a lot of the stuff if you're talking about that blog post of the many hats of an author, a lot of those you don't need to worry about initially. If you want to write, I highly recommend finding a good writers organization. I highly, highly recommend American Christian Fiction Writers. And there are a lot of people who are members of that who write nonfiction as well. But it is an excellent source for learning the craft, because you have to learn the craft. You can have the best story in the world in your head, and you can put it on paper, but if it doesn't read well, so there's certain things that you have to learn. When I first started, and people throwing out all these acronyms, POV, what is that? Point of view. Well, okay, why didn't you just say that? That kind of thing. But there's a lot of things that need to be learned. And like I said, I honestly, if it wasn't for American Christian Fiction Writers, I probably wouldn't be published. But they have an annual conference, but they also have local chapters where you can learn. And then they have online resources and online courses as well. And it's not a real expensive annual thing. But so through that, you meet a lot of friends, and iron sharpens iron. And so you have people that you work with. Early on, I had a lot of critique partners. We would read each other's stuff, and everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. So you share things a little bit at a time, and it takes time to grow as a writer. I thought I could if there was just a book that I could get, and it just have all the things. You do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and that didn't happen. There's a lot of books out there, but it is a growing process too.
So what I'm hearing is the organic connections of community with other people striving to be a part of the same thing, doing the same thing, has really been helpful and inspirational to you then. Is that kind of summarize
Yes.
it?
And even before COVID, we had an online community, but then obviously when COVID hit, everything went to online. And so it's even easier now. And I have another group of friends, writer friends through another organization that it's just a handful of us, but we're all in the Oklahoma, Texas area. And so we Zoom once a month, and it's just a good accountability thing to make sure we're staying on task. If anybody is having problems with anything.
Mm-hmm. I like that word, accountability. So, so there's some time within those meetings or that particular meeting you're talking about to where discussion back and forth, how are things going? Are things moving forward? Are you reaching writer's block or stuff like that? Is that what you mean?
Right. Like I say, this one is mostly just encouragement, but yeah, an accountability partner is always good. I think your wife would be a really excellent one for you based on what you told me.
Yes, I know. And I tell you, the podcast that I do, which by the way, for those of you watching this on video on our YouTube channel, this is also going to be available as an audio podcast on our Anchor website or Anchor show, Other Things With. And so I'm excited about that. I'm actually on Acast as well, another podcast that I have called gwot.rocks, God, the World, and Other Things. And this video program is a subset of that. But Anchor, I'm excited. I found out that Anchor is actually owned by Spotify. So they have a tremendous reach. And for those of you who want to do podcasting, Anchor is totally free. And I questioned them through a chat thing. I said, I'm not understanding this. And they said, basically, sir, for us to post your podcast, it costs us, it's like cents. So they're looking for content. So we have that going, but I'm excited because there are a lot of people also, Mindy, who they want to listen to this while they're driving to work in the morning and the rush hour traffic. So they're going to have that capability as well. But in closing, as we wrap things up, I think we're going to actually come in basically right on time. We got 6 minutes. So if there's anything else that's on your mind, I don't think we're finished with our conversation, but I am trying to do well in honoring your time and not going over. I think you know me well enough from our past that I don't suffer from lack of speech, and so I want to be honoring of your time. And so definitely, I would like to come back if you're open to that. Probably when your new releases come out, your next book. And we can camp out on that and give some time to the book and give us kind of a synopsis and an overview and also how things are going since this conversation. But I want you to just share with us, with the audience, if there was one piece of advice that you can impart, what would that be? Just kind of something to leave people with.
I would say, if you feel that God is nudging you to do something, do it. Chances are it's not going to be easy, but I have learned through trial and error that it's it's easier to do it His way. And I don't know if reward is the right word, but there's just been times when I've known God was wanting me to do something. I think I gave you an example of my fourth book or my fifth book. There was something he wanted me to do. I wasn't going to do it. It was going to be very emotional. I didn't want to do it. And I kept, no. I had to rewrite that book 3 times. And the third time was when my editor came back and said, we're going to have to move your pub date out because this just isn't working. I said, will you give me 30 days? I think I know what I need to do. And she said, okay. Sat down, looked at my husband. I said, go buy stock and Kleenex. And I said, okay, God, I will do it your way. I knew it was going to be very emotional, and that's what I didn't want to do. And so I did. I rewrote that book in 30 days, and I sent it to her. And within a week, which is unheard of, but within a week, I heard from her, and she said, I love it. I have no changes.
That's fantastic.
And that just killed me, rewriting that book so many times, but it was a learning lesson. If I just done it God's way first. And since then, there's a lot of things that he's wanted me to do in my writing that I've been like, oh, man, I don't want to do that. Okay, fine, I'll do that. So, and in the end, it's always worth it.
Amen.
Because I will tell you on that story that I struggled with, I received a letter from a reader later who she went on to tell me how that book had given her hope. She was struggling with something in her life, and she said that book gave her hope. And it just brought tears to my eyes. I said, God, if that is that one person that I wrote that story for, that you had me write that story for, then it was all worth it.
That's fantastic. I think that's a great note to wrap up this session on. And as we close out, I just want to remind our viewers that there's a bunch of ways to connect with Mindy, and they're all going to be on the website. And MindyObenhaus.com. Her email is Mindy@MindyObenhaus.com. That's simple. And her Instagram.
The most challenging part is learning to spell Obenhaus.
Obenhaus. Yeah, that's Obenhaus. And Instagram is the same thing, just Instagram.com/Mindy.Obenhaus. And Facebook, the same thing, just .com/author Mindy Obenhaus, all one word, author Mindy Obenhaus. But Mindy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And with that, this is a wrap of show number 1. And to our viewers, with this, I bid you peace.